Welcome to our Poultry Perfection Showmanship. Today we are going to cover how does a youth show a chicken. So we're going to do this twofold. We are going to do it as club leaders or volunteers and as a youth. So this is a way that you can educate the kids on how to show their chickens to a judge. Some of the learning objectives we're going to cover today are to be able to learn to treat common pests and diseases that backyard chickens contract, and also to identify and present the parts of the chicken to the judge so they feel more comfortable, because this is definitely something that they need to practice at. But before you can do this, you need to walk a mile in the chicken shoes if they wore shoes. So a fun way to start this off is to do the chicken dance. Okay, so stand up. Oh God. Ready? No. Now come here.
My friends, it is I, Maximo. And today I'm feeling like, how do you say? A chicken! So let's do it.
Come here.
Hit it!
Come on, ready? Come on, do it with us.
No.
Come on. Look at his belly, he's doing it. Oh, I messed up.
Do your best chicken.
Come on. Do fine. I'm going to zoom in on that. Oh, this is a little squirrel.
You have to do a little.
So you can do that for about 30 seconds, or you can do it for a minute.
I do not know.
Alright, so now we're going to do an overview of the showmanship requirements. So in a typical show, the kids have their birds, and then they're going to walk up to a table, and on that table will be a cage of some sort, and they will have to present their chicken to the judge, identify the parts of the chicken, and then they're going to have to put the chicken into and out of the cage and then answer questions. But first you want to be able to have your youth prepare their chickens at home. So sometimes things plague our chickens, like pests or diseases. So there's two I want to talk to you about today. First would be mites. So I'm going to pass this around, and mites show up either on the combs, wattles. They can cover the whole bird. They can get under the scales of their legs, and they're also found at the base of the feathers. So they look like little black dots. They're very tiny. They are in the millions once they get on these chickens, and they're very easy to transport to different coops and also from chicken to chicken. So you have to really cover your biosecurity bases here, which means you have to make sure that you keep your healthy birds separated from your sick birds, and you want to make sure that you're careful to not pass this along to your own chickens. So y'all can look at that. An easy way, once they get scaly mites under their the scales on their legs, is one way you can treat that. They do become very dried out, so you can put Vaseline on those, and that's also a show tip as well. So we'll cover the show tip side of that when we get in to showmanship. Next, and one that's plagued our chickens, are fowl pox. So fowl pox can show up on the combs, and it shows up on the wattles. For the dry pox, they look like a perfect little circle, and they get really flaky. By the time you see them becoming more of a scab, then your chickens are on the backside of the virus, but it is very slow moving, so it takes forever to get out of them, and it will go from one chicken to the next. If you can catch them when they're like this picture here, when they're that yellowish, whitish color, then you can move your sick ones away from your healthy ones and put them in, like we like to call, an ICCU, or intensive care chicken unit. And then hopefully you can keep them separated, but it's transported from chicken to chicken contact and by mosquitoes. So generally, if one in your coop gets it, the rest do too. And there are two ways, well, more than two ways, but 2 ways we'll talk about today to treat that. So as a preventative measure, you can give them the chickenpox vaccine. And it's a 2 vial thing, so you have a powdered version and a liquid version. Then you will mix those, and all those instructions come with it. And then you will inoculate them or give them the vaccine on their wing web, and those instructions come with it too. So that's your preventative measure. You'd want to do that in the 12 to 16 week range, and definitely before they start producing. Let's say you're lucky like we were this year, or unlucky, and they get pox before you vaccinate them. Then you can treat them in order to make it dry up quicker. We added sulfur. So this is the bonide version, and I don't want you to touch it, so I'm going to pass around the picture of it. But it's a plant fungicide, and it can be added to their feed very easily. Just mix it up in there, and as they ingest it, then it can help to dry up the pox. They don't particularly care for it, but when they're hungry, they will eat. So that way it can get in their system and dry up those pox really well. If you do not treat pox at all, it can go internal and become wet pox and get into their nasal passages and their respiratory passages in their mouths, and it can cause them to suffocate. So you don't want that to happen. All right, so another thing you have to do is prep your bird. So now we're going to talk about the chicken prep portion of showmanship. So we'll do the washing and drying and tricks of the trade first before we go into breed specifics. So for you to wash your chicken, ideally you would want at least 2, if not 3 tubs. And they don't have to be this big, but they do need to be wide enough to be able to place your chicken in and then feel comfortable. So it doesn't need to be too close of quarters. Chickens, ironically, actually take pretty good baths, and they're pretty calm. It's much better than bathing a puppy for the most part, or kitten if you do that. So we've used a clear bucket today so that you can see the whole process. I'm not going to wash the chickens today because it's a little cool, and you don't want them to catch a chill, because then they can get respiratory issues, and then you have a whole nother battle to fight then. So ideally I would want 3 tubs. 1 with water and Dawn dish soap in it, because it smothers out any pests and it really cleans their feathers very nicely. Then the next one would be just water, so you will rinse them in that one. And then for show prep, you really want one with water and vinegar added to it, because the vinegar will give their feathers a nice little shine. So to wash your chicken, you will keep your hand cupped over their feathers. That'll keep them from flapping. So we want to dip them in the water part. And they're going to flap a little bit. So make sure that you wear something that you don't mind getting a little wet. Okay, so she'll probably be a little nervous because there's not really water in here. But if you add warm water in here, they're actually very calm. So I would put my chicken in here and I would push her down a little bit until the water comes up to her cape here, to her head area. And then I'm going to lather her up really nice, move her wings around so you can get the water under there. And then I would add Dawn to the top here and work my way through the feathers. Now you never want to scrub her like you would a puppy or a kitten, because you can break the feathers all the way down at the follicle. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to damage her feathers. So I'm going to work it in there really nicely, and then when I'm done here, I will grab her like this. So I cover her wings so she's not flapping and soaking me. So then I would take and I would do the same thing in the water. So she's good and soapy now, and I would move her into the water and then rinse her off there. And then after I get her all rinsed off, then I would take her again and dip her into the water with the vinegar. Now, sometimes their heads can get really dirty, so you want to do kind of a quick dip there. So I would take her little head and dip it under the water really fast, and then wash off her comb and waddle. Now, this is a Brahma. So Brahmas have feathery feet, and their feet get really nasty and dirty. Chickens in general, their feet are going to get really nasty, so sometimes you can't just scrub it off good enough with your hands. So a trick of the trade is to use a toothbrush, and you can take the toothbrush and work around their feet. Now I know you look like this is going to take you about octopus arms, right? You need 8 arms to do this. But when they are wet, actually in the warm water, they're pretty cool and docile. But you may want to have an extra set of hands to hold them while you scrub them. Or you can sit them on a table and then work around their feet to really clean them off, because you want them to look nice, pretty, and yellowish orange. Okay, and their feathers go all the way down, so you can see on the back their legs are going to be scaly, and you can really use that toothbrush to get in there good there. Now, after I have washed her, then I'm going to dry her. Always remember the possibility of chicken poop. So prepare yourself for that. She's okay. She's not going to come after you. She just wants to look at you. Okay. So, if our chicken's really wet, we're going to first start out with a towel. And then I'm going to put that towel over her, and I'm going to dry her in the direction of her feathers. So I will never ruffle her feathers up, because again, you can break them. Okay, so I'm going to dry her in the direction of her feathers, get her as dry as possible, and then you can air dry her. She's just staring at you. You can air dry her. So you can put her in a cage that's lifted off the ground so her feet do not get dirty and ruin all the work you just did. Or you can use a blow dryer on a very low heat setting and blow dry her. Again, low heat and the lowest drying setting. You don't want to ruffle her feathers all up and really scare her. But they do really well with a blow dryer too, ironically. So, that's your washing and drying procedure. After that, you need to shine your chicken. So the vinegar did a little bit for her feathers to shine them, but you also want to bring out the color in her comb and her wattle. So her comb is this portion up here, and her wattle are these down here. And then you also want to bring out the really pretty color in her feet. So in order to do that, we use Vaseline. And Vaseline's a good moisturizer too. So it'll take away any of this flaky or ashy look that they have. And for her legs, you want to rub it down into the direction of the scales so that it'll lay them down really nice and neat. So you can see that this is red, but once it's cleaned up and has Vaseline on it, it'll really shine very brightly for your judges. So you want that for showmanship, and you want that for them to judge your bird as well. I'll let her sit there and look at you guys for a minute. But again, remember, the possibility of chickens, there's always poop, so prepare yourself for that. We're going to do a brief reflection of the things you learned about washing your chicken. So it's called a quiz trade. Here, sit here. And the way we do that is you each have cards. And all your cards are going to be some questions and for you answers. All right? So this gives you the opportunity to all be experts in your question. So if we had another pair, I will do this with you, Kaylee, so that we can show you. So don't show your partner. You're going to be partners, and then I'll be partners here. Don't show your partner the question. Okay. So the idea here is 2 parts. You look at your question, you become an expert on your question and your answer. Okay? And then you're going to turn to your partner and you will quiz, and trade. So Kaylee would quiz me and ask me the question. And then I will try to answer, and then she'll tell me if I'm right or not, and then elaborate. And then I will ask her mine. So that's my portion of the quiz. And then at the end of this, what you would do, especially in a larger group, is we would trade. So now I'm an expert on her question, she's an expert on my question. And then she can go and ask that question to someone else. Okay? So, start back over. Now, tricks of the trade here as an instructor would be, I learned this teaching, do not give them a sheet of paper to fill out, because then you miss the communication side of this and them actually talking to each other and teaching each other and quizzing each other, because then they'll hand the paper off and write it down. Okay? So, let's go ahead and do this. Quiz, trade. Are you need questions? Need help on some of yours? Okay.
What problem?
Proper.
Proper ways to Fry a wet chicken.
Yes, that's it. Think you use a
What are the signs
towel
of frying rice?
and you're going to
Of course, I don't like that one.
dry them in the direction of their feathers, or you can
Mine are
use a blow dryer. And then you can use it on the lowest setting.
Face of feathers.
Is that right?
Switch.
Okay, so here is yours. Why should you use Vaseline on their combs and their wattles?
Wattles and legs. What are the signs of frazzle?
That way it will shine.
Yellow beans.
That's right. And what else does it do besides just shine?
Their combs,
Changes
their
the
wattles.
colors.
They can
Makes
be
their
on
colors
feet.
brighter.
They're not really on the
Yes.
feathers,
What
but they're more on the
else?
skin than the feathers. And they're also called like pops.
It's moisturizing.
Good
So
job.
it'll add moisture to their skin, like when your skin is dry. Okay, so that'll help there, help them not be dry.
Oh my
Okay.
God,
If it comes to me.
So then what we would do is trade.
Oh, we already tried.
Did you trade? Okay, so grab yours. Don't have the one that you had before. You'll trade, and then what we would do is go and be partners this way. So now you be partners this way. Go. What are the proper ways? Oh, you need help. You need help. Why should you use Vaseline on your chicken before the show? Okay.
Why should you?
Use Vaseline on
So,
chicken before the show.
Why?
The
What are the proper
Vaseline
ways
helps
to dry a
them,
wet chicken?
Look more shiny and look more clean and everything
You
like
dry them.
that. Makes them better for showmanship.
So it doesn't break the feathers.
Okay.
What are the signs of feathers?
Okay. And what are the signs of foul mite?
They are dry lesions, can
The
be on their
mites.
combs and their wattles.
These are the mites. The
Wet
pictures
pops
that
be
your mama showed us
internal
first
in
time.
their mouths.
Good job.
True.
First picture.
And then we would trade.
What did it
And then
have?
if we had more people, we
did
could
you
take
see?
it off. So now we're going to talk about the requirements as far as speaking to the judge. So now you've done all of your prep work. She is nice, pretty, white, and all moisturized and shiny. So now comes the hard part, where you actually have to speak to the judge, or you're going to show the judge your bird. That's the whole part of showmanship. So you need to know what your bird is. So in this case, Henrietta is a Brahma. She's a light Brahma. Okay? And at this point, you would know that she's a laying hen, and they may ask you questions about how many eggs she's laying in a week, or something of that nature. They're asking you these questions to see if you understand the breed of your bird. So Henrietta here is a meat bird. So her main focus, you can tell she's a little muscular, is because her purpose is for meat. So she is going to really put on that muscle. So she will actually lay less eggs than a Rhode Island Red or a barred rock, because they're going to be a dual purpose or production bird. So dual purpose means you can use them for meat and eggs. So dual purpose birds usually will give you about an egg a day. Sometimes they may miss in a week and give you 5 to 7. Oh, Henrietta here may be even lower than that, because again, she's going to concentrate on building those muscles because she's your meat bird. So for Thanksgiving, for chicken fingers, you would want a Henrietta bird instead of your egg production. She's not she won't be offended or scared. So they're also going to ask you, she won't be, she'll be fine. They're going to ask you about the parts of your chicken. So here's a good study guide for that. You will work generally from the top down. So you point to them as I call them out, okay? So we would have the comb, which is going to be on top of their head. Think about combing your hair. Then you have the beak. And then you would have the wattles, which is under the beak, kind of around the neck area. It's also your comb and your wattles are the red portion.
I want those stuff.
Okay. Your eyes.
You can touch their eyes too.
And now what about their ears or their earlobes? Chickens do have ears, they're just not like us.
Here.
That's right. So they're going to be kind of behind the eye, and there's usually a little flap here. You do not have to mess with that. You can just point to that area. And then we'll go down to the shoulder. And the older you are as a participant, the more involved they're going to want you to be as far as knowing the parts. So your shoulders would be here. They may want you to identify different types of feathers. So these kind of feathers up here are called the cape, and think about a Superman cape. Okay, they're up towards the neck area. Then they're going to ask you, you want to hold that for me? Okay. They'll ask you about the breast of the chicken, so this is going to be up under here. And then they're going to move on to the legs. So you would have, you would talk about the hock, which is the upper portion, like above what you would think is the knee for us. And then the shank would be the lower portion here. On other birds, it will not be feathered, so it's easier to see. And then you would see her feet and her toenails. All right, and then the vent, it's another word for her, what? Her booty. Okay, so that would be the vent. And then they're going to ask you about the wing. So you could spread out the wing. Yeah, go ahead and go to that one. We'll see, she may be more comfortable sitting. So if I'm showing my bird to the judge, I would want to fan out her wing feathers, okay? And just keep her nice and calm. So they're going to ask you, basically they look for if you know the difference between the primaries and the secondaries. So right here, number 4 is the secondary, and that's going to be back here, closer kind of to her armpit, okay, would be a general term. And then you will have your primaries, which are out here on the tips. Now, if you really fan it out, you can see there's a shorter feather in between the two, right? This is going to be the axial feather. So if you can identify these things, that really impresses the judges, especially if you're this age, which would be Cloverbud, or a junior. Okay, then you move on up, they're going to want you to be able to identify more difficult parts of the bird. So you actually want to kind of go into the other portions of the wing maybe, or go more in depth on your breed specifics. Okay, now for showing the bird as far as the cage goes. Okay, so the other part is not only am I going to have to talk to the judge about what my bird is, what's her name, what breed is she, but I'm also going to have to put the bird in and out of a show cage, which can be a kennel, like you see here.
Oh.
Or a different type of cage. So generally they all have some type of mechanism on the front. You would open it. And the key here is to know how you're supposed to put your bird in the cage. So think about yourself. If you're scared and you throw out your arms, you don't want something to come from the back and hit you because it could hurt your shoulder. Same with your chickens. So if I'm going in head first, it would push my shoulders and my arms back. Same with your chicken. So anytime you put your chicken in or out of the cage, you need to remember head first. And a way to keep them calm is to take your hand and place it over their wings. And then I would put her head first in. And when I get her in here, and she may be a little scared because this bottom's slippery, I would push her down a bit, let her get steady, and then close the cage. Okay? And then at this point, a lot of times they'll want to talk to you and ask you some more questions. So let's pretend Kaylee's the judge. I would sit here, I would talk to her, I would have my hands in front of me or talk with my hands like I do, and then she may ask me, okay, now get the chicken back out of the cage. So I'm going to slowly reach in, and at this point you can take your hands and put on the chicken this way to help keep her wings from flapping. So I'm going to push her down a little bit, turn her to face me. And she may flap, but if she does, that's okay. Stay calm. Okay. And then we're going to pull her out head first. So if she were to flap her wings out, they would just hit this part and not necessarily bend her wing backwards. And then I would get her back under control and move her back to the table. So there are other ways that you can hold your chicken. The easiest way that I teach our youth, and a good way of control, is to take your ring finger and your middle finger and put them together. And then those are going to scoot up under the belly of your chicken. And then her feet are going to go here. So she's going to sit like this. So you can take your pointer and your pinky finger and you can actually kind of secure her legs gently, but gently but firmly, so she doesn't move. That also gives her kind of a cradle. See if I can get her to turn over. So she feels safe. So you can see I have my 2 fingers in the middle, and then I have my pinky on this side of the meaty portion of her leg, and my thumb wrapped around here. Gonna try it, Bailey?
I'll try it.
You're gonna try it, Kaylee? And then I can talk to you with her. I can move her around. She is pretty calm. Okay, if she starts to flap, the easiest thing to do is push her close to you and put your hand over her wings till she calms down again. You wanna try it? Got her? Good job. All right, put Henrietta back on here. It's okay. It's okay. It's normal for chickens to flap, so just don't get scared. All right, so going over the parts of the bird, we've gone over her breed specific. She's a Brahma and she's a meat bird. You need to know your breed. You need to know how to put them in and out of the cage. What goes first?
Head.
Head first, okay? Because we want their wings to fold back down, not to come up over their head because it could damage their wings. So I also have a quiz tray for you on this part. So the only prep work that goes into this is for you to decide your questions. So we're going to let you
Give me an easy one.
go over this. Give you an easy one. Okay. All right.
Same thing as earlier.
Here you go. We'll give you this one.
Okay.
All right. Quiz tray.
Let me read this.
That's all we got to tickle that.
That's what happens.
I don't know this one.
You'll be okay. That's why I said you got to wear something that you don't want and destroy. Scare your
What is
chicken.
the proper way to hold your chicken?
You put your ring finger and your middle finger together
Are
and then slide it between your feet.
red?
Yep. You're right. I don't know why I did that. You're right. It's that.
Yeah, and then slide it.
Parts.
Okay,
What
then your
are the
feathers
red
out of the wing.
On top of a chicken head and
The wing
under
feathers.
the beak.
Secondary? Yeah. Axial.
Yeah. So the red parts are going to be her comb and her wattle.
I knew that.
Okay. Why do you place a chicken in the show cage head first?
That
She's
way,
about to get you.
Angry at you.
I'm sorry.
that way
Can I touch you?
that way it don't hurt their shoulders.
That's right. That way it doesn't hurt their shoulders. Okay. So then normally we would trade and then go on from there
Okay.
and go around the circle. Okay. Now that we've had a work incident, we will move on and review the things that you have accomplished today. So again, reminder when you're dealing with chickens, wear something that you don't mind getting chicken poop on because it can happen. All right. So we showed you how to, a youth should show a chicken to a judge today. And then we covered the parts that they need to present to the judge. And we also learned how to treat the common pests like mites, and then also how to treat or prevent pox. Henrietta, you're making everyone nervous. All right, so those are your accomplishments for today. So I hope that you guys can take this back to your clubs and teach the kids how to show their chickens, and then I hope that you can show your chicken to a judge. Remember, always wear something you don't mind getting dirty.
Okay.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Oh my God, dude,
That's what